Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
How are you, Lynn?
Doing well, doing well.
Good. Glad to have you here with us today.
Really appreciate you having me, as always.
For those of you that are joining us, this is Lynn Greenberg. She is the founder and CEO of Pivt app. I met you it was 2 or 3 years ago via LinkedIn initially.
Yeah, it was quite a while ago.
It was a while ago. And then we met up in New York City several years ago and just have been connected ever since, because I think what you've done, again, as a relocation employee myself a dozen times, would have been so helpful for me to have had on any one of our moves, including our most recent move to Boston. So welcome, everybody. I'm excited to have Lynn Greenberg here. If you are watching, feel free to put your comments your questions in the comments, as well as let us know where you're watching from. If you're in the global mobility industry, if you're in relocation, or if you're real estate, be sure to put down there who you are and what you do. We'd love for you to connect with Lynn if you haven't already. So, well, thanks so much for being here. I've really enjoyed, especially just as we've talked some during this COVID crisis, just again, seeing the viability of what you're doing. But let's start by just letting people know how you even came up with this idea for this app.
Yeah, so as I've told you probably one too many times, Pivt was actually started out of my own experience. I relocated to London with my employer at the time, which was Bloomberg, and I landed there without knowing anyone and faced the issue that I think all people do when moving to a new and unfamiliar place, which is, how do you go about making your new city feel like home? And more specifically, there were two things that I really needed. The first was information on my city from people I trusted. I didn't know where to live. I didn't know which bank to join. I didn't know where to take my mom for dinner when she came to visit. Things I didn't want to rely on a Google or a TripAdvisor for. And then the second piece of the puzzle was I was starting a new job and didn't have time to recreate my network from scratch. And as anyone that moves knows, it's friends you need the most when you're adjusting to a new and unfamiliar place. So I became curious about it, didn't have a business experience or technology experience aside from my current job at the time at Bloomberg, but started to speak to other relocated employees and expats around the world. And what I realized was the problem was much bigger than just myself. And I became really motivated to, find a solution, because I had the most incredible experience abroad. And it pained me to know that, 30% of relocated employees quit their job within a year or move back home because of social reasons. There's way too much that you can experience and learn from in being abroad that I would hate for a social barrier to be the reason that you returned home early.
Right. And it is. It's so hard. It's hard for a variety of reasons, and depending on what stage of life you're in. Like, you were a single young professional, but for the young mom, that creates an entirely different challenge. For the mom of angry teenagers, another challenge. For that trailing spouse that has to recreate their job again. And those connections, now that we have technology, can be done so much sooner, as well as long after. So I love the way, and I wrote up here on the little banner that personal experience serves as one of the best foundations for innovation, for problem solving. So I love how you do that. I love how you've written articles. I love how you've just taken, like you said, you weren't in relocation, you weren't a real estate agent, but you just saw a problem and you solved it. And I love how you have gone to Worldwide ERC and written articles in other places. I enjoyed a recent one that you wrote about how to make friends in a new city. I love the fact that you highlighted Bruce and Age Konecki, who's a friend of mine, both are friends of mine in the mobility industry in Dallas. But is that one of the biggest challenges that you find?
Yeah, certainly, especially now during COVID, during social isolation, I think the biggest thing that we've come across, and I've certainly experienced, is, how do you make quality friends right away? And how do you find community? So whether that be, connecting to other relocated employees that have a similar experience to you, and can relate to, the struggles and the challenges that you're going through, and hopefully give advice to how to navigate it further, but also being connected to people that share common passions and interests. New York Knicks fans in London, other vegans in London. All of the information is out there, and the community is certainly out there. There's just before Pivt, there was no way to tap into that network and connect with people in that meaningful way.
Sorry, I have myself on mute. I have a garbage truck right outside my window. And so I'm in the lobby of the place where we live here in Boston, and it can be pretty loud. But I love that. How can we better adapt the relocation process to today's consumer with available technology? I mean, I know you've done that, but I mean, again, you're a younger generation than I am, and I think that's probably one of the advantages that you have in being able to see how the consumer has evolved, and yet the processes around it haven't necessarily evolved with them.
Yeah, and look, even being a millennial, it's something. So Pivt was a consumer app before we launched our B2B solution, and we got approached by corporations that said, this is something we're really having trouble with our relocated employees and business travelers. Is this something you'd be interested in building for businesses? But one of the things that we really got to learn while being a consumer app is that, as much as I feel like I understand the millennials and whatnot, and what the user experience is because I relocated, it's so important to just keep keeping a pulse on, the actual users. And so everything that we build on Pivt is a direct reflection of what, our users want and what the mobility industry needs. But I think, as you mentioned, the biggest thing that people are doing now that they might not have done in the past is they're really resourceful. If they don't understand what's going on, or are looking for a restaurant recommendation, they pull out their phone and they Google it. They don't call customer service. They don't, call a friend. And so what we're doing at Pivt is we're giving them the resources that they need in the palm of their hands the moment they find out about the move. And we stay with them throughout their posts, so past RMC and DSP time and spend. And I think, having that support network in the palm of your hands is really something that, younger generations, but also, past millennials are really starting to appreciate.
Well, and I think so. And I know with our corporate relocations, we often had a contact person in the headquarters city that I could call, but I always felt like they were like on Google, like Googling, like whatever I needed, or maybe it was just somebody that had been recommended. There's nothing quite like getting the experience, or getting somebody who's actually used a service or that lives in that area, and having that connection like that. One of our biggest challenges was just even figuring out what neighborhood we wanted to live in. And I always talk about Dallas. It's the size of Connecticut. I didn't have a way to get connected, even though there are Facebook groups. It's not the same thing. Real estate agents can't tell you a lot of the things that I needed to know. They're forbidden by law and different restrictions that they have on them to talk about schools or certain neighborhoods. I didn't fit the stereotype, right? I was international. I had lived all over. I wasn't Texan. I really needed to be able to connect with other expats that had moved to Dallas and had found international groups there, and who knew other people that had been Americans that had lived abroad that had returned. So I love the way that this really, I guess, creates a curated experience for the client.
Yeah, and a proactive one. So as I've told you, I had the same experience. So I ended up living in Notting Hill in London just because I had seen the movie. And I saw that there was a direct train line to, Liverpool Street Station. And that's all I knew. But, it would have been helpful to reach out to alumni from my university and people that had similar interests and were from my hometown that really understood, what the person that I was, and be able to provide, recommendations based on those facts.
Yeah, I love that. What are some, you're so entrenched right now, I think, in global mobility. You've got so many great connections from Ben Cross and being on his show and other people in the industry. What are some of the trends that you're seeing? What is your perspective with the industry and where it's going?
Yes, there's a bunch of big trends. The first one being that I think, especially with COVID-19, I think relocation, we've gotten an outpouring of requests, because I think people are starting to see that, especially in these times where employees are socially isolated and in such a vulnerable state, that employee experience and employee well-being actually has a really high ROI. And so it's not now it's much more than a nice to do. It's a core competitive business need. And with that, I think as we've talked about, there's a move towards lump sum, and providing relocated employees more flexibility in regards to how their mobility works.
Yeah.
And they're looking for lower cost solutions.
Yeah.
And technology certainly fits right in there.
Yeah.
And
Well, I want to give a shout out to Aaron Flores. He's watching. He is in Dallas. Thanks
Hi,
so much
Aaron.
for being here. I was just telling him, actually, I got a call. I got a call this weekend from somebody that was doing a lump sum. But I commented to him, it was interesting to me as a relocation client recently. We just wanted to rent for a year. We wanted to downsize, and we wanted to live in downtown Boston and kind of get an idea of where we want to be. Yet I was signed a residential real estate agent to help me find that place.
Right.
I would have been so much better off served if I had known that Aaron Flores, the Aaron Flores of Boston, and I'm sure there's one out there, Aaron. I don't know that he matches you or she matches you, but to have that kind of specially curated, experience to know who to find. And that was, I think, the biggest challenge. And that's one of the things that I do is help people ask the right questions. But is that something that Pivt will do, is to help curate, what is the right agent if you're going to be looking for a high rise versus a farm and ranch in Dallas?
Yeah. And again, the interesting thing about Pivt is it's all user to user generated. So whereas I had trouble when I was in London because I would search on Google and TripAdvisor, and the people providing the recommendation, may have been the restaurant owner's brother. Everyone on this platform is in your situation, and the whole purpose is to make it really trusted. So it will be another relocated employee that's recommending Aaron's great services because they had a great experience.
Right. And that's so key, because we don't really have that in the real estate industry, any kind of checks and balances.
Mm-hmm.
And who's the best real estate agent for one person may not be the right person for the other. So I love that. Let me give a shout out to a few other people that's on here. Wendy Gilch is on here. Wendy is the founder of Selling Later. I think you've connected with her. Love that platform for relocation. I hope some relocation companies will really take a look at that and think about maybe utilizing that before they list a home for sale, especially right now. Jack Jample's on here with Stryker. Thanks everybody for being here. We appreciate it. Let's talk about, I hate to talk about it because I want to avoid it, but we can't avoid it right now, right? But how about COVID-19? How is Pivt responding to this? I know I helped you do some research for the effect of COVID on clients, but what is Pivt's role in that, and how can you kind of change that experience for people?
Yeah, so as I briefly mentioned, we've been getting an outpouring of reach outs because relocated employees are right now not so much concerned about the logistics and where they're going to live and where they're going to send their kids to school. It's primarily been about mental health and well-being. And so, we, with the great help of you, conducted a survey to really dive in deeper and learn more about this. And so we reached out to transferees around the world to really understand what was most challenging for them during COVID-19. And some of the results that we found were pretty alarming. The first one being that 73% of transferees weren't familiar with the healthcare system in their new country prior to COVID-19.
Right.
Really, really, really staggering. The other one was, since the quarantine had occurred and we conducted this survey about 2 weeks ago, only 5% of transferees had heard from their RMC, and only 57% had heard from their employers. And so they weren't getting the support system that they really needed. Another interesting one that I found was, 57% of the people that we interviewed said they didn't have a chance to develop a support network before the shelter in place orders. And, with that, the biggest challenge in being in a new city during COVID-19 was their social well-being. And it's because, they're in quarantine in an unfamiliar place without a support network, and, very confused about what's ahead of them and what to do, and oftentimes very far away from their friends and family. So it's definitely, a really challenging time for transferees. And I hope that the survey that we conducted will shed light on, what the new normal will be. And I hope that there's a silver lining on the other side of this, that, employee experience will rise to the top.
Yeah, no, I think it will. And I think it's kind of the opportunity that we needed to like we talked about it earlier, to adapt and start adapting new technology. Again, I talk about it. I relocated to Boston in January. Now, this has been one of our easier moves, right? I didn't move here with children. I don't have babies, as opposed to so many of our other moves when I was pregnant or had toddlers or teenagers. I honestly cannot imagine having moved in January or February, or to be some of my friends. Like I have a friend in Germany right now who's moved to, they were actually packed and they were moving to another country, and that move's been changed. Or I spoke with Jerry Jones last week, who's created a program for schools. Can you imagine those students that had to return back to another home country, or maybe they're in lockdown and their friends had to return to their home country? Just some of the challenges that has created.
Yeah, and I heard someone this morning, actually, and what was interesting was hearing her perspective on homeschooling in a foreign country, because obviously she can't teach the curriculum and understand the curriculum in a foreign language.
Right.
So, there's all these different hosts of problems that you wouldn't have thought about that are really bubbling to the top.
Yeah, I think there's so many problems like that. And again, we moved a lot of times at Christmas time. So again, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of that mother that's new in a city in January, and some of the experiences we had ended up in the hospital with early labor and 2 toddlers, and I didn't know where to send them. If you don't have a network, or if you have teenagers and they start school and then they're pulled out, and then they're just, and they're already reeling from the changes. And I think to be able to connect with other parents going through that, or to other people that have moved recently. So even in the best of times, we need that ability to connect. And I always say it's more than finding a house when you're moving somewhere. It's really finding home. We need that ability to connect and find those other people that moved the same time of year. Or even when I worked with relocation clients, a lot of times the employer would know about other employee spouses that lived in different parts of the cities or went to different schools, but there was no way for that spouse to get in touch with them. I think what you've created is such a beautiful and easy way to seamlessly connect people to find their tribe when they move to a new city.
Yeah, thank you. And I think, what the other important thing to note is that RMCs and DSPs, as our head of product, Matt, always says, do a flawless job in actually moving people. They really do. But the problem is that certain aspects like social well-being aren't on their checklist currently. And so, they don't currently have the bandwidth to source these answers and to provide this service to the relocated employees and their family members. And so, I'm really hoping that we can kind of step into the picture and assist them in, really facilitating the social needs of their transferees.
No, it's so true. And I always say, if the mover messes up something or cuts a rug when they're opening it, there are a lot of things that can happen in a move that can be replaced. But that emotional connection, not finding the right school, not finding the right neighborhood, finding out, a lot of times we would move and I would find out later that the neighborhood that I really wanted to live in, my agent never showed me the homes in that neighborhood, right? I didn't know it existed.
Right.
And they're not looking at it from the same perspective as the consumer. And I think that's why it's so important to get connected to other people that have that same perspective.
Yeah. And I think, look, as talent, the best talent is becoming harder and harder to come by. As you know, relocation is a milestone as a part of your experience at the company, just as much as getting a promotion and whatnot. And so it's really kind of the experience that they and their families go through that will really alter their views on the company.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. what's next for Pivt? What do you have in the works now? When can we get you in Dallas? I know I've moved from Dallas, but I am eager to, again, I go back to Dallas. To me, was a really complicated city to move, more so than maybe New York. I've lived in Chicago, but Dallas is the size of Connecticut. Right? You've got a lot of great neighborhoods, north, south, east, and west. And a lot of times when we moved, it didn't matter where we lived. There wasn't an office. It was just the airport. And to me, Pivt is the perfect place, or Dallas is the perfect place to have Pivt. But so that's my plug for Dallas, because I want to get back to Dallas more. And I'd love to help you get it established there. But what's next for Pivt? What is on your plate, and where are you hoping things are going to go in 2020?
Yeah, we would first of all love to be in Dallas. Not just because of the weather and the great football, but, it seems to be, a great place with, a fantastic relocation footprint with Aaron and you and, Altair Global over there and Eras and so many others that are, really making a mark over there. But we're really looking to find the right partners and scale in cities where we can create a network effect. So we need, a certain number of people that this platform will work in a given city. And then in terms of technology, we can roll that out in a matter of minutes. So we're really looking forward to, working more closely with RMCs and DSPs and corporations to onboard their users, really give transferees a way to take their own social well-being into their own hands, and hopefully, scale around the world.
Yeah, I love it. And I think, and one of the reasons I'm doing the Friday features that I do is I'm talking to people that have moved, relocation clients. What I find so fascinating about these people, and you certainly, I told you, I could have interviewed you for Tuesday as easily as I could have interviewed you on Friday. You fit both categories, but Fridays are relocation clients that have not only lived it, but they've created really interesting careers from it. One of the things that really struck me, getting into the real estate industry, also dipping my toes into the relocation industry, is that often we try, in any company, it doesn't matter what industry, we try to solve our problems within a bubble. And I think it's so important to have the outsider perspective, but not only the outsider perspective, so many of these people offer such great solutions. I think of Sunday Bean that I interviewed a couple of weeks ago, Jerry Jones, and Daniela Tomer, who's a counselor. And then this week it's Amel, this week is Miriam, Almafiore, has written a book called This Messy Global Life. And then Amel, and I think you've met Amel in New York City, who has this great Tandem Nomads, which helps relocation spouses create portable careers. And that was one of the things that's so fascinating to me. The agents, if you look at the work the agents did for the sale of my home, which I primarily did, they got paid the equivalent of about $2,000 an hour for the work that they did. Yet absolutely no support was provided to me. I left a 6-figure job in Dallas to start all over again in Boston. That, to me, seems a little backwards. Again, I think the technology has caught up with us, and that there are a lot of things that we can be doing in relocation to lower the bottom line, the cost, cut cost, and to increase the experience for the end user, the consumer, which is another interesting thing for me. So often I would hear people talk about the consumer, and I would realize, or the client, and I realized that they were talking about the real estate agent as the client, the brokers did, or the relocation companies when they talked about the client, talking about the employer. I love the fact that yourself, these people that I'm interviewing on Fridays, are the clients, right? They are the people that are the end users. So yeah, so I love what you're doing, and I love, like I said, that there are so many of you out there that are seeking to solve our own problems.
Certainly it takes a village, especially in the relocation industry, where there's just so many areas to tackle, because essentially these people are picking up their lives and starting over.
Right.
But there's so many different things that you need to tackle. So it takes, a whole lot of partners to get it right. And so I'm glad, that there's increasing, number of people that are really digging into this space. And I hope, and as in turn, that RMCs and DSPs and corporations, kind of outstretch their arms and are, really adaptive to the new solutions that come out.
Right. Well, and I think that the big point to make too is that these solutions aren't expensive, right? The user experience, or the cost of Pivot's not expensive. The cost of doing some of these things that have such a high emotional toll, take such an emotional toll on people. The cost of addressing those, sometimes it can be as simple as a phone call. Sometimes it can be as simple as acknowledging it or showing empathy. And we do have some areas where we can cut cost. And so I love the fact that, again, that you're embracing technology to fill one of those big needs, that it's not an expensive thing. It's not even the relocation company's job necessarily. To me, a lot of times it's the real estate agent's job. But if we can solve it with technology, it just makes a lot of sense. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, everybody that's on here today, I hope you'll connect with Lynn, get to know her, connect with her if you haven't already on LinkedIn. Any final thoughts or anything that you want to share with people?
No, I so appreciate everyone listening in, and for you for having me. And I really hope everyone stays safe and well during these challenging times, and that on the there's some silver lining on the other side of this. But certainly, if Pivt might be of use to your company, or if you may have known someone that might find it useful, would love to connect.
Yeah, and Ron Bruno just joined in. He's actually a lender he did the last closing a couple weeks ago for one of my clients. He moved from California, and he says he's still waiting for a good sushi recommendation. So Ron, get connected with Aaron Flores, because I can guarantee you Aaron can get you connected again, which is one of the nice things, is that Aaron is also relocated. He understands when you move to a city from another state that you're probably going to want to find something that reminds you of home. And Aaron's a foodie. He loves to eat, and he knows where to go, and he's a joy to be around. And those are the kinds of people that I think Pivt will pull together. I know Pivt will pull together. So I love that. So Ron, get connected with Aaron. Thanks everybody for listening. Do connect with Lynn, and let's get Pivt to Dallas. I'm excited about seeing it there, Lynn.
I can't wait.
So, all right.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thank you, everybody.